Welcome to our second episode of Crate Digger. Today we're going to be interviewing Josh Steverson. Josh played in All American Organ Grinder, Arlen City Massacre, and most recently he just put out a new EP with his band Abyssalis. Josh is a big figure in the Atlanta scene. He's been around for a long time. He's also a big part of my personal history, having gotten me my first tech job at a time when I was really desperate for it. So really grateful that you've come here today to help me out and get my channel kickstarted. I'm really excited to interview you and find out what cool albums you brought for us today.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and so let's get this started.
Great. First up is Faith No More. This is a little bit less about this album in particular, although this is one of my favorite Faith No More albums. It has so many amazing tracks. It feels like sort of their peak in some regards, but because just like everything that Mike Patton does, and that gets to the root of all of it, every album is its unique offering. So to say it's a peak, first of all, it's subjective. But to me, it has some of the most amazing composition and songwriting and just madness that they have to offer. Everyone knows Faith No More from Epic, from their first album with Mike Patton, The Real Thing, which is a much better track in my mind than Epic. But such an amazing album. They were clearly all very young, at that point. I think prior to that, Mike Patton was doing Mr. Bungle, and I'm sure a million other things. Now he's doing 2 million other things, it seems like. But he's just such a prolific artist that he spans tons of genres. Back in the early 2000s, my very good friend Stephen Smith got me into Mike Patton after years of his brother and other friends sort of in that circle, telling me how great Faith No More is, and it just never, for whatever reason, didn't sync with me. Then Mike Patton put out his EP with Dillinger Escape Plan.
Yes,
Irony is the Dead Scene. Amazing, mind-blowing stuff. And then, of course, there was Tomahawk that came out in early, I think, 2002. The self-titled that I picked up, that was my first exposure to them. Absolutely recommend this. If you're new to Faith No More, or any of Mike Patton's projects, just a huge influence on me. And it allows me to listen to other vocalists that everyone, goes apeshit about and say, still not as good as Mike Patton, in my mind. So, really amazing album. Midlife Crisis is probably my favorite from this album. In 2014, my wife surprised me with tickets to see them at the old 695 Masquerade. Behind the Masquerade, they had this outdoor venue where they would run Slaughter Q and a few other, outdoor, events and so forth. And they come out, they have flowers lining the entire stage, absolute like yacht rock vibe, that you're about to experience. And they came out, and this was after they released Soul Invictus, which at this point is their most recent album. I believe it came out in 2013. Anyway, it was the first time I'd gotten to see Mike Patton, as well as the first time I'd gotten to see Faith No More, of course, play after they came out of hiatus, from their initial sort of run of albums. And it was hands down the most amazing show that I think I've ever seen in my life.
Oh, wow.
But just such a cool time to be there, and the perfect location to see something so iconic in my musical history, I guess. It was quite a memory.
That's a great memory. I'm glad you shared that. And I cannot believe that 2013 is when they put that last album out, because I could have sworn it's only been 5 or 6 years. Dang. Well, that's pretty wild.
Yeah. Do yourself a favor and definitely listen to Easy, because holy shit, what a cover of a song from the 80s, whenever Lionel Richie put that out.
Yeah.
But it's stuff like that that really makes Faith No More amazing, like how they can tackle any genre, it seems like, and just make it fantastic.
And would you say that Mike Patton's eclectic nature has influenced your playing and stuff? I mean, you've been in a bunch of bands. While they've all revolved around extreme music, they all are pretty unique.
It was absolutely hearing what he did with Irony is a Dead Scene, with Dillinger Escape Plan, that I was fucking blown away at his ability to go from, like I said, covering Lionel Richie, and playing piano and just like this angelic voice that he has, and then make these insane, gnarly, sounds playing with Dillinger Escape Plan, and have some of the most melodic lines, and even that album, like hands down, it was such a great piece of music, and absolutely influenced like what I wish I was doing. Now, granted, a lot of that was because I was big into Dillinger Escape Plan at that point, and still amazing musicians, but yeah, absolutely had a big impact in the early, when I was listening to more like hardcore. You and I have talked about this before, like Curl Up and Die, Botch, some of those early, aughts, the
really chaotic styled hardcore.
Absolutely insane stuff. And then you had the Every Time I Die, like all sort of in that scene, at the same time, and a lot of really good metalcore that has kind of come out of that, like Darkest Hour. Really good stuff. That still just like goes as hard today as it did, back then. So
agreed. Yeah. Tell me about why you brought this album.
This album is Ritual by Black Dahlia Murder. One of my favorite albums, if not my absolute favorite album by them, with some of my favorite songs by them. Also, really represents, personally a huge time in my life for music and just experiences. 2011, 2012 time frame. All American Organ Grinder was at our absolute peak in terms of the Atlanta metal scene. We were playing a bunch of good shows. We played with Dying Fetus when they came through, when they were touring on Reign Supreme.
Oh, cool.
And absolutely one of the best Dying Fetus albums, like hands down. So like just such an amazing time to kind of get to play in the scene with other bands, that were, in the sphere. As well, there was, Prime Mover was going hard at that point as well. You had Adharma, you had, Subdivisions, you had Bear Me Breathing, you had like just all these awesome bands that were sort of making their mark out there. We got to play a lot of fun shows with a lot of fun bands at this time. So this album, this is after Ryan Knight joined Black Dahlia Murder, who is an Atlanta native. I believe he joined, or as they were wrapping up writing on Def Leppard. His addition to the band in terms of like what he brought, writing style and everything like that, I feel like really materialized on this album. And you could tell his influence not only on the leads, his style for one on lead is like, he's not the most technical, he's not the most, flashy, but he's absolutely one of my favorite guitar players in the extreme, genre and so forth. So what he brought to this album and to this band, such an iconic band, with Trevor, rest in peace. On this album, you could tell his impact on the rhythm, as well. And so this album, I've done my best to learn, as many of the songs, anytime I, like listen to it, I try to pick up another song and, go learn some of it. So it's definitely influenced my playing directly, because, I love learning these riffs. I love, learning some of these patterns and techniques and so forth. And it's just such a fun album to listen to and to play. And represents such a awesome time in my life personally. I had just started dating my wife, and so became my wife, so that's awesome memories. Again, like Grinder kind of at our peak, playing some awesome shows. And then after this, came out, we released our full length, a number of months later, and did Battle for Mayhem, which was this sort of like Battle of the Bands thing, which we had played a couple of years in a row, and had not won. But then for that year, 2013, we won it. I guess it was actually in 2012. And so we had our album release on the same day, played Mayhem Festival, and then left after playing our set at Mayhem Festival and went over to the Masquerade and played Summer Slaughter because they were two festivals on the exact same day in Atlanta. Insane.
Wow.
But we were so tired at the end of that day. Two big festivals in one day, and just had an absolute, insane time. So it was a really good core set of memories, in the music space for me at this point.
What year was that?
So we put out the album in the summer of 2013.
Okay.
In July, and so then like I said, shortly after we played Summer Slaughter and Mayhem in the hottest fucking day in Atlanta ever, because when you play Mayhem Fest on a stage sponsored by Sumerian Records, you get the opportunity to build your stage.
Okay.
It's such an honor to wake up super fucking early in the Georgia heat and go build a goddamn stage in Atlanta, and then find out that you are not allowed to leave until after the show.
Because you have to break down the stage?
Because you have to break down the stage.
Wow.
But then you're like, hey, you guys chose us to play this Battle of the Bands, or you guys chose us as the winners of this Battle of the Bands. We said at the time we have Summer Slaughter on the same day, so we have to go. All right, cool. You can go. That's fine. We understand. But the venue, Lakewood.
Oh yeah.
So the way that they set these up is these stages in the middle or on the peripheral, parts of this gigantic fucking field. So we got to carry our equipment through the crowd in the middle of the summer. Again, still that didn't change throughout the day, obviously, but yeah, it was fucking dreadful. But still so much adrenaline that day to play the show, then get to another show and everything. It was still a great time.
I can't believe that part of the deal for performing is that you actually have to assemble the stage.
Yeah, that came in an email after we won.
Was that a festival doing, or was that
that was
Sumerian
the Sumerian Records stage doing? And part of the agreement from we were fortunate because we were in Atlanta where the show was being played. A lot of the other bands that were playing the same stage also had won battles of the band from their respective areas. Mm-hmm. So we had people coming from South Carolina, Chattanooga, and other areas that had won their things. And then, there were the big bands that ultimately played on that stage later that afternoon. But yeah, it was a wild time and a wild agreement, and sort of it gave you a little bit of a glimpse into what it's like to be signed with a big label, or even a not big label, but
bigger label.
A bigger label, yeah, which was wild and not really seeming all it was cracked up to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
that's a really cool memory, man. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Blood
in the Ink.
Blood in the Ink.
Black Dahlia Murder is known for their closers. The last song on the album is always the banger.
Oh, that's true.
I Will Return.
Miasma.
Yes. So many amazing closers.
So. Yeah. I know everybody loves Nocturnal.
Yeah.
But for me, I just have so much nostalgia associated with Miasma, and I was living in New York City at the time, and it's just that whole album had this really grimy, dirty vibe that really moved me at the time.
Absolutely. I mean, it was a great album, and I listened to the hell out of it. Saint for Unhallowed. Without question, Nocturnal is what pulled me in. And this album, in my mind, it takes what Nocturnal was doing. I mean, it was their next offering.
Mm-hmm.
So, it takes what they were doing with Nocturnal up just so many notches. And then you add Ryan Knight on top of that, taking up lead.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, no, Def Leppard was after Nocturnal. But yeah, I just hands down my favorite.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. A pretty big album in the metal scene, Behemoth the Satanist. So yeah, tell us why you brought this.
Partly because it's somewhat controversial. I listened to Behemoth, with Demigod and Evangelion, and I enjoyed them a lot. But similarly with Ritual, like in terms of like what really pulled me in to the band, this one, it was obviously different. I don't know if it was a little bit of experimentation that they then kind of ran with. I don't think they've reproduced this, in terms of the impact that this one had.
Oh yeah.
In my mind, since then, I still enjoy Behemoth, but this album, this was like powerful, made me really like embrace. I've always enjoyed like occult themed, things, whether it's imagery or concepts, and part of it is because I was an angsty teenager that was forced to go to church, and I never felt any of it. So once I began to get into I hate to continually reference Black Dahlia Murder since we moved on to a different album, but that was one of the things that I loved about them, was their ability to have this like occult themed with their lyrics, with their imagery, but they never took themselves very seriously. They were still like the party band or whatever. Like that really got me into that, like the theatrics behind, doing that type of stuff with music. And it made me really want to do it with All American Organ Grinder. And we did some, but I was like, wherever that was present with All American Organ Grinder, it was me behind there, pushing for us to do that more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a spiritual person. This does, like it's still all theatrics and, just interest for me, but this album was like, I felt something on this album. It really moved me musically and emotionally, in ways that I, can't quite describe. And it was just because in my mind, like the composition, the lyric patterns, and sort of, the way that Nurgle, shapes these sort of stories and themes in his, in his lyrics and everything like that, and presents it, through the music. It was something that I had never heard before, and I didn't know what sort of box to put it in terms of music. Mm-hmm. And it was such an interesting and like uncomfortable listen, but I loved it. And I'll say that a couple of more times, the uncomfortable. And I'm finding more and more with music, like if I feel a little bit uncomfortable about it, not because of like morality or anything like that, but like if I don't know how to digest it, like if it's, chaotic or dissonant metal, like stuff like that, like it gives you that like element of discomfort, and you have to really lean into it to appreciate it. This was a little more, on the nose, but it pulled me into that, where like now I'm really enjoying those very like dissonant black metal influence, the title track, and then the closing, "Oh Father, Oh Satan, Oh Son."
Yes.
Fucking epic as fuck. And like, I just like, there will be times where like I want nothing more than the most epic song, and that's one of my go-tos.
Okay. Is that like a gym pump-up song?
It absolutely is.
Of
it's
course.
Also like an after the gym pump-up song, where I want to ride this adrenaline, rush that I've got going on. It's also like it's inspiration in a way that is not because I want to go write some music like this. It's inspiration, just simple art inspiration. Mm-hmm. You look at a painting, you go write a song or something like that. Like I feel that way about listening to these, these songs.
I would agree. Maybe I'm wrong to think of it like this, but to me, The Satanist was like a very high art kind of output from Behemoth. And to me, it's kind of like the culmination of their whole body of work, starting off as an extreme raw black metal band, going into mellow black, then starting to mix in the death metal elements. And, Zoskias Cultus is that was the album where I first started paying attention to Behemoth, and the triggered drums are unfortunate, but just like the ferociousness of that album.
Yes.
And to me, they kind of peaked with that sound on Demigod. Demigod to me is like a really well produced, but still raw, really raw energy. I was in college at the time, going to school for record production, and that I was always trying to replicate those kinds of oh man, how does he do the vocals? Like I want to make vocals that sound like this, and I want the drums to hit as hard and ferociously as these do. And the Satanist to me really is where they kind of culminated all of that. And in my opinion, every album they've put out since then is them trying to recapture this kind of magic.
Yes.
And
yes.
So, really, really great album and really cool stories with it too.
Yes. That feeds really well into my my next album.
Okay.